let's do some little vocabulary if we can, because I'd like to talk about what some of the problems are that gay people encounter, and I also like to help. You know, when I talked about going back to France, and I knew more than just poulet meaning chicken, so some of us don't know what to say, like they don't know how to ask, you know, Ray, how is Brian, because they don't know what to call Brian. So if they knew what to call Brian, they might ask Ray, you know, at work on Monday morning, more directly, how was your weekend? Are you with me? So let's do a little vocabulary. The first word is homophobia. Now, homophobia is technically means the fear and hatred of homosexuality in others or in ourselves. Right? It is an overused word from my perspective, because if you suggest that somebody who is uncomfortable is homophobic, then you're losing the power of the word. Lots of people are uncomfortable with this issue who are not homophobic. Discomfort does not indicate homophobia. Right? Conservative religious values does not indicate homophobia. The person that you talked about who said it is the same, it's a sin, and it's the same as murder, that's more than conservative religious values. That is going out of one's way to create a hostile environment around the issue. See, there are people in this room undoubtedly who have conservative religious values on this issue, but wouldn't come to disrupt today. They came to listen, to learn more information. I've had people come up to me at the end of a presentation and say, Brian, I'm a fundamentalist Christian, and I think that homosexual behavior is morally wrong, but I also think telling an anti-gay joke is morally wrong. Okay, so that person and I can work together, right? We don't have to embrace each other's values. I have different values than they do, right? I interpret the Bible differently than they do, but we don't have to debate the Bible at work. All we have to do is work together with professional respect, right? The homophobic person goes out of his or her way to create a hostile environment. It's the joke teller, right? It's the person who doesn't want you to come today, who pressures you against coming. It's the person who defaces signs, right? When the gay and lesbian employee resource group puts up a sign, they take them down. Right? It's the person who, on my way out of my apartment one day, on my way to work, there was a big sign over my mailbox that said, "Get out of town, McNaught, I hope you die of AIDS." That's homophobia. And the impact on that is that the next time the phone rings, you pick it up not knowing, is it the person who put the sign up? And that's the intention, is to intimidate you. So that's homophobia. I know it's a new word for some people because the Census Bureau gave me a call one time. I swear that this is true. The U.S. government called me and said, this is after I filled out the long form, said, Mr. McNaught, it says here you're a homophobia educator. I said, yes. She said, well, we don't know what that is, but we think it's for people who are afraid of leaving the house. Are we right? I said, no. That's agoraphobia. I said, homophobia is the fear of homosexuals, and there was a long silence. Thank you very much, and a click. Heterosexism is different than homophobia. I want to suggest that there probably is not a lot of homophobia where you work. There's probably not graffiti in the bathroom. And if there is, it should be immediately removed. There probably is not threats made to people, physical threats. There may be. The more pervasive issue is heterosexism. Heterosexism, like racism and sexism, is a value system. Right? In sexism, the value is that it is better to be male than it is to be female. When I was a kid, the first thing that an adult would say to you to get you to change your behavior, if you were crying, for instance, is, big boys don't cry, little girls cry. Boy, that was established early. You had big boys and little girls, right? That's how they got you out of the bathroom, right? Don't preen in front of the mirror. Your sister preens in front of the mirror. When I played basketball, the coach would say, all right, ladies, out on the court, if he was upset with your performance, right? And there's a real link. Don't throw the ball like a sissy, son. Well, Dad, how does a sissy throw a ball? Look at your sister, right? He's obviously not watching women in the Olympics, but look at your sister. Don't throw like your sister. Don't catch like your sister. That's sexism, and it's a value system, right? Racism is the same thing. Racism is a value system that it is superior to be one race over another race, right? You're with me on that. We don't need to go into a lot of explanation on that. That's why most of the pictures of people who achieved status in my history books were pictures of white people, right? And that's why these black children were picking white dolls. It is a cultural bias about what is superior. In heterosexism, and you are free to believe this, but you need to be aware of how it impacts your music, both as individuals and as a company. With heterosexism, the belief is that it is better to be heterosexual than it is to be homosexual. And the core of that is that it is God's intention, if you're a theist, or nature's intention, if you are not, that you be heterosexual. Again, it is nature's intention that you give birth to a heterosexual child, or God's intention. And if the child is not heterosexual, something went wrong, right? What's the first thing parents of gay children often say when told by their child that they are gay? What did I do wrong? I brought home a heterosexual baby. If I had watched you carefully enough, if I had watched your friends, if you had had positive role models from your father and from me, right? The old absent father, domineering mother theories about sexual orientation. If you hadn't fallen into the wrong group. One woman wrote Ann Landers a letter and said, "Dear Ann, my daughter is a lesbian. Is it because I allowed her to wear blue jeans as a child?" Right? So what did I do wrong? The image is you're born heterosexual and you're driving down heterosexual way and you see gay way and you turn gay. Why? Well, because it's so attractive. Right? You turn gay. And haven't you heard that expression before? My sister turned gay. My uncle turned gay. Right? You've heard that, right? Turned from what? They have to turn from something. They were heterosexual before they turned gay. Right? And that's why we can bring them back. Right? If we just pray hard enough, or they have the right sexual experience, or we beat them up, you know? If we do something right, and we haven't figured it out yet, but when we do it right, we'll turn them back. And that's what it's all about. And so our language reflects that. We say things like, my brother admitted that he was a homosexual. Have you heard that before? My cousin admitted that she's a lesbian. Do you admit you won the lottery? Or do you admit you've been to Europe? No, you admit to things that are bad, right? So the choice of the word admit, the conscious sometimes choice of the word admit, suggests that you think the person is telling you something shameful. And if that's your approach to it, that's your music. And that's why they tell Aunt Martha before they tell you. Because your music suggests that you can tell me that you're gay or an axe murderer and I'll still love you, as opposed to nature has a plethora of options. None of us choose them, but wherever you fall in the continuum, I love you. What a very different message that is. Right? So heterosexism is a value system. Now, how does this impact leadership here in your company? Part of Workforce 2000 and the acknowledgement of diversity in today's workforce is not just to tolerate diversity, but to celebrate diversity. You talked about wearing ethnocentric clothing, whether that would be seen as positive or negative. Or should I fit in, and walk and talk like a white woman, right? Even have people say, well, she's not, but she's as close as she can get. I mean, that is the mentality, can it not be? And corporations today are saying, no, that's not what we want. I mean, at least in theory, they're saying it. In theory, they are saying that if we want to be competitive, we need to get you to tap your unique journey through your unique lens and give us a perspective on not only the workplace, but who we're trying to sell to, because we only have one way of looking at it. And there's nothing wrong with the white, male, heterosexual way of looking at things, but it's just not the entire vision. So we need women and people of color and Jewish people and Muslims and people with disabilities and older people and younger people to give us their perspectives, because you have gifts that we want to affirm, not differences that we want to tolerate. Right? Are you with me in terms of vocabulary? Well, what are the gifts that gay people bring to the table? And what are the gifts that a transgender person brings to the table? See, if heterosexuality is here and homosexuality is here, then what kind of a gift do I have to bring if I'm way down here? I feel like you just want me to be quiet, don't talk about it much, fit in, do my job, and don't bother people with my difference. And that's very different than, Brian, we're glad you came out because you have a perspective on the gay community we'll never have without you. And you have a perspective based upon your experiences of being gay, hiding who you are all those years, having the fortitude to come out, the courage to do so. You bring something to the table that we really want to tap. Do you see the difference? So heterosexism is a value system that really impacts how we perceive this issue and how our music that comes from it. But it's also something else. Heterosexism is a supposition of heterosexuality. That's the after effect. In one major corporation with which I've done training, 76% of the gay employees report having been told an anti-gay joke by somebody who thought that they were heterosexual. Right? You look around the room to see if you can see a gay person. Right? And what are you looking for? In our culture, what are you looking for when you look for a gay person? You're looking for a masculine woman in our culture, right? If we were playing charades right now, right, what would I do to get you to say the word gay? I'd do a limp wrist, right? In our culture, I'd be light in the loafers, right? That's our, right? So an effeminate man or a masculine woman in our culture, those are the stereotypes, right? That's what we look for. So you look around the room and you don't see anybody who looks that way, so you assume that everyone's heterosexual. So you can say, that's so gay, right? And you can do the limp wristed impersonation, and you can make comments about religion thinking you're doing so without anybody being affected. That's how this issue is different than issues of race, where it's pretty clear we have a person of color in the room, right? Heterosexism. Now, I want to suggest to you that you cannot pick out gay people, but I can. I'm very good at it. How many of you know heterosexual people who satisfy gay stereotypes? Men or women who you look at and you think, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, thinks a duck, right? Right? And we're not all talking about the same person, right? So, how many of you think that there's somebody at work who's not out? Somebody, you think, I know somebody gay who's not out at work. Raise your hand if you would. Okay. So, some of you are aware that there are people out there who are gay that people don't know are gay, and some of you are telling me, I know heterosexual people that people think are gay but aren't, right? So stereotypes are hard. People don't all fit. But I happen to be very good at picking out gay people, and one of the important things I do in this workshop is that I take a moment and I point out the gay people in the room. What? No, actually it's a powerful moment for everybody. What's wrong? There's some anxiety in the room. What's the feeling? The feeling is that if he points me out, my life is going to change. Do you agree with that? That if I point out, and it's harder on men in our culture than it is women, it's harder on heterosexual men than it is heterosexual women, not because heterosexual men are boorish, but we beat heterosexual men up emotionally more on this issue than we do women. Women were allowed to dance together growing up when I was in school. Two women relatives could sleep in the same bed without anyone questioning it. But men are not given that latitude, which is why I think that the issue about the friend being there and shaking the hand is more about how amazing it is that this heterosexual man is comfortable enough in himself that he's not worried about what people think. So the men in the room who are heterosexual are aware, and for an instant, if you felt for an instant that I was really going to do this, and maybe you didn't, but if you did for an instant and you had a moment of anxiety, you knew that if I pointed you out as gay, your life would change here. that 10 years from now, people would be saying, that's the guy the gay guy picked out at the workshop. And the gay guy said that he was really good at this, so we're sure that he's gay. Oh, but he's married. The gay guy says it doesn't matter. Lots of gay people have been married. But it doesn't look gay to me. Doesn't matter. Brian said it doesn't matter. So, do you think if I did that your life might change a little bit? How might it change here? How might people treat you differently if when we left this room, the word got out to your work area that everyone in the room saw that you were gay today? How would your life change here? Any ideas? Any thoughts? Yes, please.
A lot of people might be uncomfortable asking you what you were doing on the weekend and things like that.
Sitting with you at the table in the cafeteria as they used to, sharing a cubicle with you maybe, talking to you so that people could see you talking, so what are you spending all your time talking to the gay guy for? Right? Do you think when the person walked into the restroom it might change the dynamics in the restroom? Or the locker room if you have one here? It's time to get dressed for whatever athletic thing we're going to do together? How it might impact the environment and sense of safety that people have? Solely based on one person saying he's gay. And if you can get in touch for a second, just a second, with that anxiety that you would have about somebody saying, and remember you told me, the overwhelming majority of you, that it was a somewhat accepting environment, and the overwhelming majority said come out. Remember? If you can get in touch for a second with how scared you would be if I pointed you out as gay in the workshop, you know how hard it is for the closeted gay people on Monday morning to come into work and be asked, so what'd you do over the weekend, and give an honest answer. Because even though this is a sophisticated place with wonderful policies and good people, the music in some areas is such that people are still afraid. And the question is, what kind of a toll does that take on their ability to give everything they've got that day? Right? And how much nicer would it be if they didn't care? If they came to work and said, oh, Ray and I went to a movie, how about you? And then you got your work done. Right? That you didn't spin your wheels at all in worrying about this topic. The CEO of one major corporation, in introducing me to his direct report, said, I accept it. See, when I go to most places, I ask the senior management to read my book on being gay, or my book, Gay Issues in the Workplace, in public transportation before I come. Why? Because I want them to have the experience, right? And the CEO of a major corporation, in introducing me, said, when I pulled out Brian's book on the airplane, the man sitting next to me got up and moved. He said, and I knew in that instant why it's so hard for my colleagues to tell me who they are, because of the big bag of stereotypes that people drag around on this topic and hit you over the head with as soon as you put a label on yourself or read anything that suggests that you might be interested in it. Right? And that's the bag we're going to try to pull apart again today. Take that stuff out of the bag so it doesn't knock somebody out when they come out. Okay? Any questions about heterosexism? Okay. Let's talk about vocabulary. I like these words: gay, lesbian, bisexual. These are the three words that I would recommend, and transgender, and I'm going to come back to this. Gay is an adjective. I'm a gay man, I'm not a gay, right? There's not a gay in the hallway. There's a gay person in the hallway, a gay woman in the hallway, a gay man in the hallway, right? No one knows where this word comes from. It dates back probably to the 13th century, according to some historians. Again, there's disagreement on what its source is. It became popular among the homosexual community in the United States in the 1950s, and in urban areas, heterosexual people started using it in the 1970s. It's the preferred term. So that's why my books are Gay Issues in the Workplace, On Being Gay. Lesbian is a term that comes to us from the Greek island Lesbos. Lesbos is an island you can visit today. In the year 500 BC, there was a woman by the name of Sappho who was famous in Greek history as a poet. And Sappho lived on the Isle of Lesbos as a poet and a teacher of young women, and her love poems were always poems to other women. Because she lived on Lesbos, she was referred to as lesbian. That's the source of that term. Lesbian is a noun. She's a lesbian, or you can use it as an adjective. She's a lesbian woman. Some women who are homosexual prefer to be called gay women, but most women I know prefer the term lesbian, so try if you can to use both terms. Bisexual people outnumber gay and lesbian people, and they actually outnumber heterosexual people, according to most studies. There are more that does not mean, incidentally, that they necessarily act on their feelings. See these three words here, orientation, behavior, and identity? Everyone in the room has an orientation. Everyone in the room has a sexual orientation. Even if you never have sex your entire life, you have a sexual orientation, right? Right? Nuns and priests who never have sex know what they are attracted to, right? What's the big thing of giving it up if you don't have feelings, right? Of course you have feelings. That's your orientation, and it's around age 11 that you become aware of it. Most social scientists believe that you're hardwired when you come into the world, that you're hardwired as a heterosexual or hardwired as a homosexual or hardwired as a bisexual. Bisexual people are not confused. Bisexual people just have options that homosexual and heterosexual people don't have, right? Because of a combination of factors, environment perhaps, but more people think it's genetic and hormonal, that influences during gestation our sexual orientation. We also have behaviors. Everyone in the room is capable of behaving sexually, and this is where religion gets involved, right? Religion steps in and says, regardless of what you feel, we're going to tell you when you can act on those feelings and when you can't, right? And most religions say it has to be between a man and a woman in a missionary position within the bonds of marriage. That's what behavior is about. But you can behave homosexually, heterosexually, or bisexually, right? You could have sex with both genders. That's bisexual behavior. Identity is what we tell other people about ourselves, and we tell ourselves about ourselves. And for heterosexual people, these three things fall in pretty easily, right? I know what I feel. I feel comfortable acting on my feelings. I'm surrounded by music and Hallmark cards and love stories that say celebrate who you are. And so it's not hard for me to tell you who I am. The gay person, on the other hand, and the transgender person, and the bisexual person have orientations, right? The gay person and bisexual person have sexual orientations. The transgender person generally is heterosexual in their orientation, but they're oriented, and we'll talk about that differently in a minute, but they have feelings that maybe they don't feel comfortable expressing, and they certainly don't feel comfortable identifying. Are you with me on this? Okay. So going back to these words, a bisexual person is one who has an orientation, but not necessarily acts on it, right? You can be bisexual your whole life and be heterosexually married and never act on your feelings of attraction for people of the other gender. And bisexual, incidentally, does not mean 50-50 necessarily. You know, most bisexual people have majors and minors. You know, they have predominantly attracted to one gender but have feelings for the other gender. It's just a capacity to be attracted. It doesn't mean that you, again, need to act on it. Homosexual came into the vocabulary in the 1860s in Germany. It predates the word heterosexual. It's a little formal for most gay people. Homosexual is to Mr. McNaught what gay is to Brian. The music for me with gay is much more friendly than homosexual. It's not an offensive term, but people tend to focus on the sex part, don't they? He's a homosexual. As if that's your whole life, right? You know, Ray and I have been together almost 30 years, and for those of you who are heterosexual and been married for 30 years, my life more reflects yours than it does a gay couple who just got together, if you catch my drift. Okay. Sexual orientation is the preferred terminology. I'm gay because I'm oriented to be gay, not because it's my preference. Sexual preference does not accurately tell us the dynamics that are going on. I'm not gay because I preferred it. You know, the same talk show host who asked me, Brian, if I could, when did you decide to be gay, asked me if I could give you a pill that would make you a heterosexual, would you take it? Well, I sure would have taken it when I was 8. And 10, and 14, and even 21. But I've worked so hard at affirming who I am through therapy and prayer, and I love my life, and I know that I, from my perspective, am singing the song that I was taught, by my higher power. So while it would have been my preference as a child to not have my feelings, it's not my preference today. I celebrate who I am, but I am gay because of my orientation, not my preference. These are words that I would not use. Choice, it's not a choice, and it's not a lifestyle, and it's not something I'm admitting, it's something I'm affirming. I have a partner. The word lover is often used in the gay community, not so much in the heterosexual community. Heterosexual people with the word lover, other images come up than I'm intending, like Motel 6, and that's not where we're going. So this is not a term that I necessarily use with a heterosexual audience. Significant other, which is a little stilted. When I was in London, the people there, the young gay people were saying, we use boyfriend and girlfriend. We like those terms. So I put that up here because I want you to be aware that sometimes younger people use different terminology than older people do, and you have to remember that. That all of this is influenced by a person's age, and when they grew up, and what religion they grew up in, and their race, right? And their ethnicity. A black gay person is going to have a different experience than a white gay person. I think a black gay person, especially a black gay male, has a harder road to walk than I do, not because the black community is tougher on them for no reason, but if you grew up in a culture in which all men were called boys, for as long as they can remember, and there's a lot of emphasis on being a man and claiming that word as your own, and people confuse sexual orientation with gender identity, which they do, right? Are you a boy who wants to be a girl? They're confusing it. If a black gay man or a Latino gay man comes out, there is so much pressure to be male that it is seen often as being counter to what we need for you to be. And so there's a lot more pressure. And in addition, the black gay male is going to be dealing with racism in the white gay community. So there's all of these factors can be influencing a person's journey and what words they use to talk about themselves. Again, I use the word spouse here. I would not use the word roommate, and I certainly, friend. We've talked about that, right? You don't send a wedding invitation to us separately, right? If you want Ray and me at the wedding, put both names on and have us sit together. Well, we have you at table 6 and you're at 14. And there are a lot of single women here who need a dance partner. Hello? Well, that's an important question, isn't it? Should Ray and I be able to dance together, at a family wedding? And if we can't, should we go? Right? Would you go to a wedding in which you weren't allowed to dance? Those are sort of the decisions that gay people are making in their lives. And I want to point out one other thing before we go to transgender. The idea of a gay person, Ray and I, dancing together at a wedding, I want to suggest to you that a lot of it is familiarity. How many of those of you said that you know somebody and love somebody who is gay. Have you ever seen them dance together or be affectionate with one another? And I'm talking about appropriate, right? Okay, so your comfort level is probably going to be very different than the rest of the people in the room because you've been exposed to it, right? It's not unlike the first time you saw an interracial couple. You thought, well, wait a second, I haven't seen that before. So you're seeing gay people dance together. My mom and dad were visiting when Ray and I lived in Gloucester, Massachusetts. At one point, and Mom and Dad were visiting, and every time Mom and Dad would visit, we would change our behavior for their comfort level. You put away pictures of yourself together. You put away books with the word gay on it. I'm not talking about pornography. I'm talking about just the word my books. And we gay people call that straightening up the house. So the family comes, and you don't act normal in front of them. And the problem with it is you can't wait for them to go home because you haven't breathed, once since they walked in the door. And so I said to Ray, Ray, this next time they visit, we're going to change our behaviors because it's so stupid that we can't be ourselves, and Mom and Dad aren't relaxing. So the first morning that Mom and Dad come down, they always sit next to at the breakfast table as you head off to work. I'm going to come and we're going to hug in front of them, not at the front door, which we would do when they were there. And he said, okay, if they're your folks. And I said, we need to do this. So Ray is standing at the back door this first morning, and Mom and Dad are at the breakfast table. And Ray says, goodbye, Mac, goodbye, Virginia, and goodbye, Ray. And I said, goodbye, honey. And I started to walk towards him with my arms open, and everyone knew something was about to happen. And just as I'm about to take him in my arms, my mother says to my father, Mac, look at the cardinal in that tree over there. Now, it's okay to look away. If you're not comfortable with something, look in the other direction, right? You have the right to do that. You're not politically incorrect by not staring, right? If you want to look, but it's just a hug. But if it makes you uncomfortable, look away. Because if you're able, those of you who are uncomfortable, to look away, and I'm able to come to the party and dance, then we can both be there at the same time. But if you can't look away, if you get all upset and we have to have a Paris Peace Talks about this dancing, then one of us is not going to come to the party, and that's a shame, right? Now, the next day, and Ray and I didn't say, Mom and Dad, excuse me, there is no bird in the tree, look over here, let's deal with it. We thought, we're hugging, they're looking, that's fine. The next day, Mom decided to look, the stronger of the two. Okay, long enough, right? And then Dad, seeing that Mom looked, thought, well, I can do this too, okay. Well, you know what happened with time? It became a non-issue. It just became a non-issue. We were two men that they adored. And they did. They loved, both folks have died, but they loved Ray as a son, and they knew us as a couple. And they wouldn't have if we hadn't dared to create a way for them to look at this. It's like not coming out, thinking, oh, they'll deal with it. No, you have to come out. You have to put a face on the issue. So it's okay to look away. It's okay if you're uncomfortable with the issue to not jump in to the discussion. But with time, if you give yourself some time, I think, and this does not mean you have to change your personal values, right? But there's no sense in you and I arguing personal values, is there? If a Muslim and a Catholic arguing, where's that going to go, right? You're not going to change religion for somebody else's comfort level, right? Nor can I change my sexual orientation for yours. This is, I've lived my life, you live your life, and let's see if we can do it mutually respectfully. Well, the other term I want to talk about is transgender. Now, to understand this term, we need to talk a little bit about these four components in human sexuality. One is biological gender. This is the physical. Everyone in the room has a physical package, right? When you were born, the doctor or the midwife practitioner was asked the question, what is it? Right? Is it a boy or is it a girl? And what did they do? They looked at your genitalia, right? And they said, you have a little boy here, you have a little girl here. You know that in 1 in 2,000 births, it's not clear. It's that high a figure. 1 in 2,000 births, it's not clear whether it's a boy or it's a girl. But in the other cases, it's a boy, it's a girl, and that's based upon our what? Chromosomes, right? XX for female, XY for male, right? Males inherit their Y chromosome from their father. We all have the same hormones. We all have estrogen, we all have testosterone, but males have higher levels of testosterone that gives us male characteristics, right? Like hairier arms and hair on our faces, right? Estrogen impacts the formation of the female body, right? But we all have the same hormones. Some people think, oh no, you don't. Yes, you do, because when your mother gives you that hormonal wash, when you're in fetal gestation, right, in development, that's impacting all kinds of things. In fact, social scientists today, and we have to say, we're in the cave with the candle, putting pieces of the puzzle together, even in sophisticated, this period of the 21st century, we're still trying to figure out everything. And it'll be probably many, many, many more years before they have everything down pat, if they ever do. But they think that this hormonal wash really is influencing biological gender and gender expression and even sexual orientation, this wash that our moms are giving us. But our mom has testosterone to give us that wash too, right? So women have testosterone. So that's our biological gender. Our gender identity is different. Our gender identity is our core sense of being male or female. And it's usually between the ages of 18 months of age and 3 years of age that we all became aware in our own mind of our gender identity. And once we are aware of it, it's fixed, and it can't be changed. You can't talk a child out of its gender identity. You can't shock it with electric shock treatments as an adult. You can't do anything physiologically, at least in the history of psychoanalysis and in this field. You can't do anything to change a person's innate sense of self. Sometimes the gender identity does not match the body. Sometimes the emerging person, and this happens more and more through puberty because that's when our bodies are changing, right? That's when our hormones are starting to show up and our bodies are starting to differentiate. At this point, about 1 in 30,000 biological males and about 1 in 100,000 biological females, and some people think that figure is high, look at themselves and say, this is not the body with which I was born, that identify. I don't identify with this body, and I'm hating what's happening in my body because I don't identify with it. People who have a gender identity that is different than their biological gender are referred to as transgender, trans meaning cross, right? And specifically, if your body is not in sync with your soul, the person is called transsexual. Okay? Transsexual is a person who feels trapped in the wrong body. And about 1,000 people in the United States a year, 1,000 people in the United States a year change their body from male to female, and about 500 in the United States a year change from female to male. Okay? The operation costs about, depending upon how far you go with the operation, can be up to $25,000, $30,000 for the surgery, but it also includes hormone treatments, a couple years of therapy prior to the actual surgery, therapy after the surgery, and that's when a person is what we call transition. Okay? The only way we've ever been able to bring harmony to the life of the person whose gender identity is different than their biological sex is by changing the package. It's the only thing that's ever worked. And so when we bring up this issue of gender identity, that's what we're talking about. Now, if I worked among you and I was transsexual or transgender, I would need to come, after having been in therapy for a year, would need to come to my boss and say, I'm going to need to transition. I'm hopefully working at a company that will allow me to transition instead of firing me, and forcing me to go work someplace else. But when I transition, I need to live for 1 year as the gender to which I'm moving towards, right? So I'd be coming out of this male body. For a year, I'd need to live as female because they won't perform the operation otherwise. Why? Because they don't want me to be doing this casually. I need to know, am I willing to deal with all of the grief, that's going to be associated with this? So I'm going to be taking hormone treatments, and my body's going to change. My name is going to change. I'm going to need to talk to you about changing my ID, right? In terms of my passes, I'm going to need to talk to you about changing business cards. I need to talk to my group here, because I know you don't know anything about this. You haven't been raised, shush, Yeah, you've heard terms like he, she, or shim, or freak, and I need to have you know my story, because I think if you know my story, you'll be much more sympathetic to me than thinking that this is some frivolous thing that I've done just to get attention or to be different, right? So I'm hoping that HR is going to help me tell you my story so that I can transition. This raises some anxiety for some people. It's not generally a religious issue. Religion hasn't yet gotten into this. Some check into it, but mostly it's not a religiously based issue. It's just people's discomfort and not understanding why do you need to go through with this. The bathroom becomes an issue. What bathroom I'm going to use while I'm transitioning. Usually once the person has completed the surgery, the bathroom becomes a non-issue for people, but when they're transitioning, and every company works it out for themselves. There are some model programs that people are recommending. I'm not going to be able to provide you all the answers to this issue today. I just want you to have a comfort level that you know some words and to know the dynamic of what's going on. And I wish that I was transgender only to put a face on the issue for you that was more personal than the one I'm able to give you. I can give you an ally's approach to it. And I want you to know that initially I didn't want to have to deal with this topic. When it first came up, I thought, oh, please, why do you have to couple this with sexual orientation. Everyone already thinks that gay men are men who wish they were women, or lesbian women are women who wish they were men, thus the stereotypes, thus all the silly, stupid words like sissy and pansy and bull dyke, and, you know. That's reflecting an attitude about, and is it because I allowed my daughter to wear blue jeans as a child? All of those stereotypes, absent father, it's all about confusing sexual orientation with gender identity. So initially I thought, oh, this is too burdensome. But there weren't other people out there who were transgender who had access to talk about it, and we needed to talk about it. And then it occurred to me, you know what? The oppression that gay people face is based for the exact same reasons as the oppression that transgender people face, and it is that preconceived notion of what nature's intention is, or God's intention. Real men don't wear dresses, right? Real men don't see themselves as women. Real men don't love men. Right? Are you with me? Even though our issues are different in terms of what puts us in this box of minority status, the belief behind it is the same. And do you know, just to make the link for you, we have a problem in this country with effeminacy. Right? So a man who decides to transition to female is dealing with a cultural bias about effeminacy. We don't tolerate effeminate men, heterosexual men in this culture. Would you agree with that? Heterosexual men who are effeminate are teased for as long as they can remember for being sissies, aren't they? Gay men who are effeminate are beaten up far more regularly than masculine gay men are. Why? Because we don't like effeminacy, which incidentally triggers into a lot of our reaction to people who want to transition from their gender. Why would a man want to wear women's clothing? And incidentally, just real quickly on this, what do you call a man who wears women's clothing in general? Transvestite, right, or a cross-dresser. What do you call a woman who wears men's clothing? Comfortable. Fashionable. We don't call a woman who wears a man's suit and tie. If you got on a plane and the Delta flight attendant woman had on a suit and tie, you wouldn't say, well, there's this transvestite, would you? No, it's fashionable, right? She's stepping up. Sexism. He's stepping down. Do you see the link? I'm just wanting to put it out there for us to sort of, where does all this stuff come from? And just to cogitate, you know, where do my gut reactions come from? Why is my music so different sometimes with effeminate men than it might be with masculine men? Okay, so gender expression is different than gender identity. Gender expression is, am I going to express myself in traditionally masculine ways, or am I going to express myself in traditionally feminine ways? And this is really culturally biased. Right? Because that has really changed. Men from India who first come to the United States, one of the first things they learn is you don't hold the hand of your male friend in public. In India, it's perfectly appropriate. Right? But in the United States, what do people say? He's gay. Right? Right? I had an AT&T employee tell me that he held the hand of his 21-year-old son because he had muscular dystrophy. And people would drive by saying, "Faggot!" as he's holding his son's hand, because we're intolerant of affection between men. But that's a cultural bias. People go to Italy and come back and say, oh my God, you see all the homosexuals in Italy, all the men are walking arm in arm. Well, that's culturally acceptable in Italy and Israel and India, right? So you understand how the culture can influence gender expression, but we make decisions based upon it, don't we, in this culture, thinking, oh, you know, if they're acting outside the box, it must say something about their sexual orientation or their gender identity. Now, sexual orientation is who am I erotically attracted to, right?